Check. Okay, there we go. Just making sure that my audio is at the right level. All right, I'm going to wait a few minutes for people to get on. But yeah, I not had a opportunity this week to record a FYREpod episode, so I figured I would just go ahead and sorry, I had a light that went out on me. I haven't had the opportunity to record a FYREpod episode this week, so I figured I would basically do a live one. And it's just a topic that's been on my mind a lot, as you can tell by the thumbnail of this video and the title. A lot of what I've been thinking about revolves around how the music industry has traditionally operated, and I've looked more into the history and where all of the, I guess you could say, the where all of the sources of participation and come from, and where the artist fits in all of that. And maybe, just maybe, with how crazy the system is these days, we can think of some other way to go about making music, hopefully building a career within the modern landscape, and not be taken advantage of and not have to try and do things the way that the big labels are doing. Because, here lately I've been looking into things such as preparing for larger shows and tours that could potentially happen in the future. And of course, I want to dot my I's, cross my T's, learn everything that I can, so I make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to, and that everybody involved with me, like me and my crew, we're preparing for what we would have to do. And so, as I've been looking into recommendations for what to prepare for, and looking into what we'd have to do in order to make sure to make sure that we are properly prepared, things such as expenses particularly just continue to skyrocket when we were totaling things up. Hey, Steven, what's up, man? It's great to get a chance to talk with you earlier today. But basically, I'm talking about a lot of my thoughts on the music industry, things that people may not be fully aware of starting off, and, what are some changes that could potentially be made. Because the way that it works is that I guess you could say there's two circles on a Venn diagram that the music industry has, and then there is an overlap, which you could say kind of goes into the both of these realms. You have the live music front, and then you have the recording and distribution front, and the place where they meet in the middle is in things like marketing and distribution. And so when we're talking about the music industry, we're talking about a lot of what goes on in those two realms. And it's interesting, the history of it all. It's not necessarily, it isn't checkered. for the most part, I mean, like the way the music industry started, it was not with artists or with the intent of artists getting taken care of and turned into stars for the sake of people having a chance at making a living doing music anyway. It was never founded on that sort of thing, where if you had a dream of being a musician for a living, then the record industry was your ticket into it. That was never what the industry was founded on. It was founded on technology companies, especially when we were talking the development of things like the phonograph cylinders and so forth, or the wax recording cylinders, as those were evolving, and then you got to where sound could be recorded on a flat disc that we understand today as records. You know, those were basically just, the companies were just wanting to sell their sound players, their phonographs, their record players, and so forth. And of course, for the beginning of these technologies, they were pretty much just used for dictation and speech classes, to be able to hear a voice of a loved one who was in their later years, and you would still want to hear their voice after they had passed. And it was for things such as that, more educational or sentimental purposes. But then we go into the fact that these companies still needed reasons for people to buy their record players. And so what they did was basically try to find musicians to record, so that, hey, if people wanted to play recorded music, then they would have to buy a record player in order to get the record and play it and enjoy the music that they, heard live and really enjoyed, and enjoy a piece of music that they loved over and over and over again because it was recorded. And so that was the motivation behind the start of the music industry. It was started by technology companies looking to sell their products, with the artist being a means to an end, and whatever funding was given to them so that they would be able to create a record that would entice people to buy their record players and the records that they produced that had their label on it. Then, they would shell out the funding. They'd work out a deal with the artist to where they would be able to recoup their advance. And then, they would not only make their money back, but they'd make a lot of sales for the technologies they originally came up with, so that, they could make a profit. But of course, even after things like record players and everything started going out of style, you'd have, of course, your, I wouldn't necessarily say Walkmans, because Sony had the patent on that, but when we moved on to things like personal stereos for cassettes, CD players, portable and non-portable alike, as we would see the evolution of new technologies, of course, it would seem that these companies they saw major potential in being able to have another avenue of profit. So the record industry went from just a means to an end to sell, record players and records for a little additional income, to where the recording industry could be a whole business on its own. But the fact in mind is the fact that there is still so much that there's so many people that are nowhere near involved in the creative process, and they're the ones making the money. It's grown to the point where, as we stand today, whoop. Hi, baby. Why, thank you.
You're welcome. You want anything to drink?
Water, please.
Water, okay.
Thank you. My wife brought me dinner. But I'm going to pray over this real quick. Lord, thank you for providing for us, for getting us through it today. We pray for your blessing over the food and our time together in Jesus' name. Amen. Sorry, we had a little bit of a late day, so if I apologize if for how it may seem of eating on camera and everything. But what we see is an industry that's born. Thank you, baby.
You're welcome, baby.
But what we see is an industry that's still birthed from the idea that the artist is just a means to an end. And so what we do, so it all evolves up to deals that we have today where the artist is advanced money to be able to record an album, and that's to hire producers, to rent equipment and studio time, to mix, master, and to, maybe potentially have some consultation that's brought in for mix choices and so forth. Everybody involved in that process gets paid up front. That's what the advance is for an artist. So we have 10 songs that are recorded for an album, and the artist is probably close to $13,500 in the whole, and the music isn't even distributed yet. But then we have the problem of the more costs are incurred after the album is done being recorded, because there still needs to be artwork, not just for the cover, but also for any packaging that would come with CDs, records, cassettes, any sort of distribution and physical media that would be going on. So any distribution fees, so not just getting albums out within the digital space at this point, but of course getting all the physical media into retail stores, and there are even some free samples that are given to stores that they may sell the units to, and the band is still charged for those free samples. And then we also have the issue of the rate that a band gets for sales on an album is 6 cents on the dollar for every sale. And the band doesn't actually see any of that money until every cent of that recording budget, recording, distribution, and marketing budget is paid back. And of course, the label has to recoup their advance and any other fees that are incurred in the distribution, the shipping, and the pressing and production of the record. Bands could get anywhere, could be anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 in the hole before they ever see their first sale. But then we have the problem of, the way that a lot of records sell is you go out and you play the songs that are on the record. And of course, people will want to go out and buy those songs and listen to them over and over again, just kind of like how it was whenever the recording industry first started. But the problem is, you need a lot of money to go out and go on tour and play in these shows. And then there's people who facilitate these shows that need to get paid as well. And a good source of information from what goes behind the scenes, particularly on the live music end, is a channel called Tank the Tech. He's a nice, he seems like a really nice guy. He's been a roadie for many years, toured for 18 years. Only 3 of those, I think, were in an actual band. But he's been a roadie, a tour manager, a guitar and backline instrument tech for all these many other years, and a merchandise manager as well. So he's seen a lot of these things that go behind the scenes and how rough it is really for bands that are on the road. because, hundreds of thousands of dollars have to go also into expenses for going on tour. And then we have the problem of, you, depending on how long it is, you'll start to see rentals for, say, vehicles start to really, really, really climb up because, even if you're not talking a tour bus, which could easily be anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000 in today's economic standpoint, for maybe about a month of touring, for a month of dates. But then we also have the problem of there's crew and staff that needs to be paid for the band. There's gas. There's hotels sometimes there's hotel rooms that need to be bought. If, say, the band is actually staying in a tour bus and there's really good accommodations for that, there are no bunks on tour buses for drivers. And not only is a driver needing to get paid, and they make dang good money, but it is required that a hotel room be bought every night for a driver. And if they are in a weird place where they cannot get a hotel room for the driver, they're compensated a hotel room's amount of money for that night that they can't get them a hotel. Pretty nice treatment for somebody driving a truck or driving a bus. But then we'll talk about the people facilitating the shows. There's a titan of a company that controls anywhere from 90 to 95% of the live music industry, and it's called Live Nation. And because this company owns many of the venues that bands play at, whether they be clubs and bars, or if they be actual concert venues, stadiums, arenas, amphitheaters, you name it. There are many venues that are owned by Live Nation. And those incur what are often referred to as, things like merchandise fees and venue fees. And you got to remember, bands also being a business entity, they're responsible for paying taxes for sales dependent on what state that they're selling in. So they're subject to things like wearable or non-wearable or clothing taxes, depending on how the state sets those up and what rate that those might be. And then there's credit card fees that for businesses and entities that are processing credit card purchases for them, those have to be held. And, so a band that maybe did $9,500 gross is already looking at maybe $8,700 after things like taxes and credit card fees are taken off, and that's your adjusted gross. But then merchandise fees are going for about 20% off of your adjusted gross that is paid to the venue and paid to ultimately the parent corporation owning that venue. Then there's also a venue fee that's another 20%. So there's 40% off of a band's adjusted gross sales for merchandise. And that can easily take a $9,500 gross sales night down to a $3,800 in sales after everything is said and done. And so there might be $1,000 on top of that for a guarantee, but that hardly makes up for the massive amount of losses that a band has already had to pay for using a venue and having a place to be able to sell merch. And of course, the costs that are incurred for tour support that the label pays for a band to be able to go on tour, which again is hundreds of thousands of dollars, that also has to be paid back to the label by the band. And that debt carries over from record to record to record to record. There's talk as of late where Disturbed had finished a North American tour. And I mean, in ticket sales, it's not counting merch sales and all that other stuff, but the gross sales, so many headlines are boasting, is Disturbed ended up making $17 million. But what they're not telling you is all of these other expenses that need to be taken care of when you consider tour expenses, what it means to, have all of those tour buses and semi trucks that are carrying the elements for their show production, and the merchandise fees that they have to pay on top of their, from their adjusted gross, and the venue fees and the staff that they have to pay. They're not making really anywhere near $17 million. Maybe they made $1 million take home. That still has to be split 4 ways between the band members. So, I mean, that's a pretty good payday after everything is said and done, taking home $250,000, maybe. But that's just not even diving into the full numbers for what goes into expenses that a band always has to incur. Firebrand has looked at the logistics for doing a 2-week tour, 10 shows across the stretch of 2 weeks, renting a trailer, renting a camper, and renting a U-Haul truck to pull and give some extra storage space. And even then, we'd still have to have another vehicle for those who are not going to be able to fit in a truck. And of course, can't have people riding along in the camper while it's mobile. All things considered, between estimated gas expense, and the rate for renting these things, and then of course, the merchandise we'd have to print in order to have anything to sell at these shows, so on and so forth. Firebrand is looking anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 to go on tour. And as much as I would love to do that, as much as I would love to go on tour, something in a large capacity like that is not doable where I'm at. But it's crazy just to think, labels, music, technology, development companies, which usually are the ones that own the labels, marketers, truck drivers, venue staff, corporations that own the venues, the massive amounts of support staff for a tour. Everybody seems to make good money except for the artist. And yet, what's crazy is if the artist did not exist, so many of these people in these jobs that I had listed, and then some, would not have jobs. It just was something that I thought, this is just inherently broken. Now, the good thing about this is that, with the goal in mind of, making a career out of doing music, you don't have to do what has been traditionally done by record labels, because record labels never cared about a career being made for the artist. They never did care. So, as far as what to do, the good and the bad news is that the artist has a blank slate to work with. And we can see, we can basically blaze our own path. But that leads us with the burden of trying to figure things out. Sorry about that. So I've been thinking, because, when the record industry went from just a means to sell record players to a full-on industry all its own, it became something that the record industry still needed a strategy to be able to basically sell artists to the public and not have people think that this was just a means to an end to just sell products, or else people wouldn't be as on board with supporting this business model. And there was a TED Talk I watched recently. I can't remember the guy's name. But what was interesting is that he analyzed beneath the surface as to what the music industry actually sells. I mean, music is the conduit for this. But what really the record industry has used to be able to leverage sales for artists is a culture. It played off of people's natural, inherent desire to find community, to find belonging, and to identify with a group and have this identification with values that were commonly shared among a group. And the great thing about it is that, genres. That's why multiple genres are existent today, because you can have, it doesn't matter what culture it is, as long as there are people in it, you can market to them. And that's something where it's a helpful starting point for an artist when it comes to thinking about how they present themselves and who they want to reach out to in terms of building an audience. Because I've mastered the recording side of the Venn diagram. And for those of you who are just coming on, whenever I started the stream, like, the music industry is broken up into two circles that have a area of overlap. There's the live music aspect, the recording aspect, and then right in the middle is about around the distribution and marketing facet of the music industry. I think at this point I would say I've mastered the recording aspect, having recorded myself plenty of times and worked tirelessly to hone the craft and to get it to where there is sonic excellence that dresses the songs that I write. And you can listen to Vengeance Is Mine and really hear the work that was put into it to make sure that this sounded as good as I could possibly make it. And I'm proud enough to be able to say, camera shorted out, sorry. I'm confident enough to be able to say that this record could go toe-to-toe with a lot of the big shots. So what I'm thinking is, like, I've got this side of the Venn diagram taken care of, but if you don't have the other side and the overlap in between, then you don't have two legs to stand on when it comes to running this race, so to say. And I'm thinking out loud as much as I am communicating, some things that I've already been thinking on. So bear with me as I'm forming my sentences and figuring out exactly how to settle the ideas that are running around in my head. Because the normal model and expectation that an artist has been held to for decades, I mean, ever since the 50s and 60s, whenever the recording industry started, was that you record an album, you have it distributed, people buy the record, and then you go out and play shows so that you build an audience that want to buy your record. And of course, that was a model that benefited the labels that basically that the artists were enslaved to, because the contracts are totalitarian in nature, between the between how they control the artist's finances and how they're paid, to what they can wear, what they can say and not say, how they are supposed to express themselves, what they say, not just on their record, but also off stage and on their social medias and in personal interactions. Everything is down to a T is controlled by the label, and it's a pretty miserable existence. And not only that, but we also have the problem of everybody's making money except for the artist. The artist is just a product to sell, and that's what the old model, the traditional model of the traditional record industry has been built on for so long. And so it comes time where I need to start to rethink some things in terms of my approach to this music journey that I'm on. I and many others on my label, AD Windblown Media Records, which is a independent Christian record label that is unlike anything that's going on in the industry right now. We have skills outside of writing and recording, and we help each other out with those skills and make professional media and work together to bolster our projects so we make something better together than we could separately. That's one way that we're disrupting the way that the music industry works, is we're just a label that we're not an island unto ourselves, but we work together, and we help each other out. There's transparency, there's support for each other, and it's because we've worked together that ADWMR has grown to the scale that it has, and we're starting to really make a splash within even not the mainstream, but the space that we occupy. Like, people are paying attention to what we're doing, which is exciting. But, you know, and I'm not going to go into, when it comes to being a Christian musician, what is business and what is ministry. That's a really dodgy topic, but I don't think, like, personally, I would want to make a living doing music. That way I can spend time doing what I love to do, ministering to people along the way by sharing the gospel and being a source of good, wholesome, and biblical inspiration to people. And at the same time, just, it would be a whole lot more fulfilling than working the 9-to-5 that I have right now. So I'm definitely needing to think of how I can adopt, and how we can adopt some business model that basically benefits the artist for the first time, for once, rather than corporate entities that are trying to use the artist as a means to an end. Because it's been the same way for so long, we just automatically think that it has to be done in this traditional model. And just the independent artists just have to try to keep up with the major label artists, hoping that they'll do maybe a 16th as well as the artists that have a lot of money put behind them but are getting none of that in return. That needs to, as an independent artist, I really need to throw that out of my head. So some things that I've been thinking on and praying on, and probably might be the next moves I do for the next album cycle. Aside from having some pretty big ambitious goals for the next release, which I'll go into in another video, something that I'm definitely thinking of doing is not having my album on Spotify or on any other digital outlets. Really doing kind of like what Tom McDonald does, where his albums are only available on his website. You want to get a single? Sure, it'll be found everywhere you find digital music, but not the albums. And the reason being is because, the current recording industry is kind of in a rough place right now because, it used to be when corporations were the only ones that were able to create and distribute media, you had a paywall to get behind if you were going to get this thing provided by the music industry, particularly, that connected you with these values that were represented by the artist and therefore making you part of a community. When you bought the music to enjoy and talk about with your friends, or you bought the t-shirts that were for the band or whatever like that, those were one of the only ways that you were able to acquire those types of things and identify with a group of people in very few words, if any, and become a part of a community where you felt like you belonged. Well, then social media came along. Now, influential people, whether it be artists or otherwise, are able to give out those values and a way to identify with them for free. And especially now, since we're in the streaming age where all the music is basically available to anybody and everybody for free, that poses a even bigger problem for the artist because convenience is making people go to the path of least resistance to get the music that they may identify with or not, a soundtrack to their life or what have you. There's the path that's the path of least resistance, and it makes it to where many who would be consumers of the music are not buying music and supporting the artist because why would they? That's one thing I'm thinking of doing, is making it to where, the singles can serve the purpose that they were originally meant to do anyway. They were giving you a peek into what the album was and the artist that album came from. Who is this person and what do they stand for? What do they represent? What do they have to say? What group are they a part of? And how can I be part of that group? Those things, singles do a good job giving you a taste of what that is. And if you want more, the album offers more. But there's a lot of every album out there is available for streaming for free. And even people who say, well, I've got Apple Music or Spotify Premium or whatever like that. Well, you just paid to not have ads and to have a few more features like, you're not going to be shuffling. Instead, you can listen to a song and songs in any order you want. But the fact still remains, you can still play the music for free. And for an artist where every little dollar counts in working towards, being able to do, even if it's something where making a living off of music is way in the distant future, just being able to have the money to be able to do more. Like, people are always asking me, when are you going to do these shows or that show? Come to a concert in this area, or when are you going to go on tour? Well, as expensive as it is, it's either I work even more hours on overtime than what my job forces me to do, or I get direct support as a musician to be able to do that. And being somebody who's not got his own full band, that means I would have to hire folks, and that'll end up getting expensive as time goes on. If I got somebody on the road with me, if I got 2 other people on the road with me for 14 days, that's going to add up quite a bit. And so, just being able to go out on the road, that would be being able to have an additional, a greater income would be able to help with that. Things such as really pushing in prayers, brother. Thank you, Stephen. On top of that, it'd be things like a direct support community. Patreon is an example. I don't like how much Patreon is taking out of people's contributions to their favorite creators, right? Being totally transparent, right now I have 4 patrons. They are all on the $10 a month tier, but instead of getting $40 every month, I'm getting $32 every month from after what Patreon takes out. I'm looking at maybe sometime soon moving to Subscribestar or something like that if the rates are better. But something more like, or maybe do what Demon Hunter does with their Blessed Resistance community, where they just have like a WordPress website that you just pay to access it, and there's a lot of exclusive content there. But pushing something like that would be very helpful because, I understand there's people that still can't afford to pay for large amounts of merchandise or whatever like that. Something a little easier, like $5 or $10 a month, is more digestible. And even now, if you sign up for my Patreon, you're able to get all the albums for digital download at no additional cost. Well, if you're on the $10 tier. $5 tier gets you access to the singles. But things like behind-the-scenes content, early access to music videos, behind-the-scenes demos, and hangouts on a private Discord server, all of those things and many more are accessible on either tier. But, before there was a recording industry or any sort of creator economy like we understand it today, there was the patronage system that was alive during as far back as the Renaissance period. Artists would find a way to make a living by doing art for either commission, or they had patrons that would support them for however much in certain increments of time, and that would be able to take care of their expenses. Now, they didn't live lavishly from their patron contributions, but it was still something they could rely on. And building off of a model like that could make it to where, and really, really prioritizing and pushing that, could make it to where efforts for Firebrain going forward from here could be much easier. So things like memberships, not having my albums further from here available for easy consumption. And, if we're playing live, certainly would be a great idea to try and find as many truly independent venues as possible, because most independent venues are not going to charge you merchandise fees or venue fees. And so that 40% that you could be losing while playing for a venue that's owned by Live Nation and these large capacity venues, might be smaller, but go to a club or a bar that's independently owned, and you'll find yourself being able to take home a little more after taxes and credit card fees. So those are some ideas that have been running around in my head. And of course, maybe there's also, and there's some, maybe there's even some lucrativity to doing things like virtual concerts, doing things like more like internet music interactions, like people being able to sit in on writing sessions and recording sessions and so forth, because the internet's made the world a smaller place and made people made things accessible that never were before. And maybe that could be another thing that could be added to patron benefits, or it could be something that people could get behind a paywall to be able to take part in. No, I mean, it's not about the money, but the fact of the matter is, like, so many things that need to be done cost money. And I said I wasn't going to get into a full-on explanation of, like, where the line between ministry and music business is drawn, but for the sake of simplicity, my quick summary of that is the music is the business. Music is like my job. The ministry comes from the interactions that the music makes room for. So the music is the reason why there are interactions online, DMs or comments or whatever like that. The music is the reason why there are concerts. The music is the reason why there could be meetups at conventions further down the line. The music could be the reason why there are friendships made that with other people who create music or other types of content. The music is the reason why Firebrand might take part in events that are either for charity or for ministry or for anything else. And so the music is what the music is, what's sold and what is interacted with, but there's interactions that come about because of the music that give opportunities to share the gospel, to pray with people, to answer questions, and to be salt and light. And I think that I'm convinced that is a good balance. But this is something that I'm still in prayer about and getting guidance and figuring more out about. And as Stephen, as you mentioned, and I hope that anybody else watching also has this sentiment, that you could be in prayer for Firebrand to know exactly what a direction is, because to really blaze your own path and think outside the box from the traditional music model is it's a path with a lot of uncertainty, because either there's a lot of ways to get it done or not many people have actually done it, and so we don't know what we're doing. But I think we're already off to a pretty good start where us at ADWMR, we help each other out. We don't trade money. We trade each other's skills, and we play to each other's strengths, and everybody gets to benefit from all of that. And that's how we as artists and as a label that have a message and an agenda to advance the gospel, that's how we grow and move forward. And I think maybe the chance that a lot of artists have at making a living and really making the biggest impact as a result of the freedom that comes by making a living as a musician could come by people within the Christian space being more charitable and adopting that same sort of model and mentality. And, with it being biblically based, I'm fairly certain that the Lord will have his hand on it and bless it and really make it to where it goes farther. ADWMR is the best. Thank you so much, Stephen. You're awesome. Well, I think I've rambled on long enough. Thank you to everybody who is sitting through this, who are watching the replay. Just as I'm kind of putting my thoughts together, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who has supported the current Firebrand album. And I will say, one big praise report is that Firebrand has made a profit this year. From a business standpoint, either from donations or by sales or whatever, any ways that Firebrand has been able to make money, Firebrand has made it to where there's a profit this year, and that's a huge praise the Lord. That is a huge praise, because definitely was not done by me. There was more diligence when it came to preparing this album and being ready to launch, but definitely could not do it without the Lord's hand of blessing on it. But we had, I want to say, close to 20 pre-orders, which is big. That amounted to probably around $470 in total sales. And then as of today, actually, the album, Vengeance is Mine, has made it to 2,000 streams on Spotify. Now, I mean, like I said, although I might not be considering Spotify as a place where my next album will live, the fact that 2,000 people have, or that it has reached 2,000 streams and I'm at 307 monthly listeners at this point, which is the most that I've ever organically had, that tells me that this is gaining momentum, and I'm very grateful to everybody who got the word out, who has bought the album and streamed it, so that numbers that a lot of people look at are good numbers. People that book for festivals, venues, and people who just look at the Spotify numbers and decide whether a band might be legitimate or not. That makes an impression, and I'm very grateful to people who have been wanting to make that, wanting to be giving me good numbers. I'm very thankful for that. Be sure to get the word out to your friends what Firebrand is and what we do, that there's new music out and it kicks a whole lot of butt. And thank you to everybody for your support who has taken part in this. And if you like this video, be sure to hit like, subscribe, hit the bell notification button so you don't miss any of the activity on this channel, whether it be music videos, official releases, FYREpod episodes, or live streams that happen every Monday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, and anything else that I might think of. Also, consider signing up for Patreon. Much like I said, that's where my current membership system is at, and that's where it will be until I'm able to come up with a different crowd support model. But I love you guys. Until next time, Firebrand out.